You are watching a technical assistance video provided by the Family Effect Project, engagement for families, educators, and the community together. Funded through a grant to insource the Indiana Statewide Family Engagement Center. Every learner, every family, every educator. Before we get going, I want to recognize that Jill Summerlot here, our webinar host from InSource. We have 100 people registered today. So while Jill is letting some of the others in, I just want to say a few things. So I'm Dr. Dawn McGrath. I'm the Executive Director of InSource. InSource is Indiana's statewide family engagement center. This marks the end of our second year of the grant being the statewide engagement center. We structured the center to invest deeply in 5 school corporations representing the regions and community types of our state. So we have Gary, who is our very northern urban partner, Goshen, MSD Warren, BCSC in Bartholomew, and Perry Central, very southern rural partner. So the leaders at these sites are now providing high quality support to each other and to communities across the state. Today, we are so excited to feature one of our own as our keynote speaker. Heather Hester is the Family Engagement Director at BCSC. Her work spans 22 years in the field. She's a national presenter who will facilitate our learning today on developing authentic partnerships that foster a deep sense of belonging. Re-engage, reimagine, reignite. Belonging for every learner. Heather Hester.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am so glad to be here with you. Thank you, Dawn, for inviting me to share with our group today. I really feel honored to be asked. We will gladly share the slide deck and resources with you at the end of this session. I intentionally added a bit more text to the slides than I normally would in hopes that it'll give you context if you need to go back and refer to them later. My name is Heather Hester, as Dawn said, and I have spent the last 22 years in education facilitating learning with students in the classroom from 7th to 12th grade, and professional development with teachers, building level, and district administration. Over those years, I've had the privilege of serving in many roles, first as a classroom teacher and later working for an educational nonprofit as a school development coach and content design specialist. One of the highlights of that chapter in my career was a time with the National Equity Project in Berkeley, California. During that experience, I was trained extensively in the liberatory design process, which is a framework that pushes us to design with, not for, the communities we serve. And that learning has really changed me. I've carried it into every experience since, whether in classrooms, in coaching, or in district leadership. Today, I serve as the Family Engagement Project Director for my district, Bartholomew Consolidated School Corporation in Columbus, Indiana, where I work to build authentic partnerships between schools and families. Every day I get to see how powerful it is when students and families feel truly seen, heard, and valued. And I don't do this work alone. As Dawn said, I'm part of a statewide grant project with 4 other districts, where we're learning and growing together. Across all of our supports, family partnership is the through line. Everything is viewed through the lens of improving family engagement experiences, because when families thrive in our schools, we know that students thrive too. And that's the heart of what brings me here today, the belief that that family voice and partnership aren't add-ons, they're the foundation. And when we center them, the impact on belonging, motivation, and student success is undeniable. What drives me most is a passion for making sure all students, especially those who are furthest from opportunity, have what they need to thrive. I believe that when we strengthen belonging and connection, not only do students succeed academically, but entire school communities are transformed. And that's the spirit of today's conversation: re-engaging, reimagining, and reigniting the partnerships that make schools places where every child knows that they matter and belong. Before we dive in, I want to take a moment to frame our time together today around 4 key learning goals. First, we'll explore why belonging matters now more than ever. Hopefully, you'll leave being able to articulate the impact of belonging on student motivation, resilience, and well-being, and recognize how authentic family partnerships amplify that sense of belonging. Next, we'll focus on re-engaging. This is about identifying strategies to reignite the connections that already exist with students and families and turning small wins into momentum for deeper engagement. Then we'll shift to reimagining family school partnerships. Here we'll explore moving from transactional approaches like come to a meeting to approaches that honor family voice, culture, and strengths as essential to school success. And finally, we'll talk about reigniting a long term vision. This is about embedding belonging into daily routines and systems, moving beyond one time events to sustained, authentic relationships that truly transform school culture. And as we go through these goals, at times I'll be inviting you to unmute, reflect, and share your own experiences because your stories and insights are part of building this vision together. As we move into the first part of today's session, I want us to pause and reflect on this question. Why is building belonging through family partnerships deeply needed now more than ever?
I would like to share,
Okay.
um, if we look at the timeline of school existing, right? There was always a culture where school was its own space, home was its own space. And as we've evolved as people, we've come to realize that they should be working hand in hand. So now that we've had that moment of understanding the importance and the need of that, and now's a really good time for us to stand up and to join link up and say, hey, how about we collaborate together, as opposed to, little Billy at school is one little Billy and little Billy at home is another little Billy, when really little Billy is just little Billy. And teachers and families should be coming together to support little Billy.
Love that. Thank you, Evelise.
I really appreciate what the previous speaker just said about, coming out of COVID, we just assumed as educators that, oh yeah, the family's just going to teach for us for a while, right? And then the families got to see behind the covers a little bit, but didn't really have a lot to say about it. And, this is really an opportunity where the two can appreciate both sides, can really engage and understanding what goes into the work of educating students and what goes into, raising children at home, which were two different pictures before COVID.
Mhm.
Hello, I'm Cindy from Madison County, and I uh, agree with the fellow participant context of rural communities not having access to the resources that are available to them. I've had the privilege of going through several festivals and just making it known with the literature that's out there. I must say I am struggling still with the huge gap and the disconnect. A lot of parents are just, when I even go to the doctor's office, and they have a picture of a special needs student and struggling with how do I communicate with the school, and it just makes perfect sense that now's the perfect time to be able to communicate in many ways more than ever. And I think we just need a platform for delivering the options that are available to people. Prior to COVID, we had some systems in place, but I think everybody now getting back in person, we still have a lot of families in this community that are, it's not out of ignorance or apathetic. It's just they don't have the access to people that they can just talk to face. It's almost like the door-to-door salesman. I wish more people knew. So that's my little comment. So
Thank you for that.
big
And I
comment.
love that I love that you named a challenge and also named it as an opportunity, right? Like we are positioned right now to create some change. One more, or is there
Hey
any?
Heather, it's Crystal up in Gary. How are you
Hi,
doing?
hi, Crystal.
So glad I was able to make it on the call. So,
I'm glad too.
I agree with everyone, right? It's more important now more than ever. We reflect or we hear stories of how, back in the day, our parents, were one part of the village and everyone in the neighborhood knew what you were, getting into. And you'd hear it from, the person on the corner, and you'd hear get disciplined by your teacher and all this before you even got
Yeah.
home. And then
Yep.
then you got it from your parents, right? And so the way that we parent and communicate has changed drastically, right? It's just like expanded so much to almost make it confusing, right? On okay, well, we're communicating 100 different ways.
Mm,
Well, the 100, is that the best, or do we need to just kind of narrow it down to what makes sense,
yeah.
so they can hear you instead of just all this noise, right? So how we communicate, how we interact, how we parent, how we discipline, how we come to the table together, how we balance one another, all these different pieces is in the evolving stage, and including the parent in that conversation is so important, so that both the parent internally and externally, we can say we've done this together. If you have the ownership, more than likely you have that accountability too. So we want to be able to, continue to bridge that gap, whether it was COVID, whether it's, we're trying to be different from previous generations to evolution, whatever it is. We
Mhm.
want to be able to continue to make that a better and stronger bridge than, rely just on social media or pushes to say, we got it out there, we talked about it. No, we want to have it where it's real, right? Authentic
Right.
and connected. So,
I'm going to read one from Marina Fernandez. She says, there are more distractions than ever for students. It's so important for schools and families to work as a team. There is still some finger pointing happening between school staff and teachers.
Mhm. Yeah. Thank you so much for all those thoughtful reflections and for coming off mute and sharing with the whole group. Yeah, and you guys have named a lot of things already. So the past few years we know have been full of disruptions. There have been shifts in learning environments, there's been social isolation and challenges that have left many of our students and families feeling really disconnected and sometimes even fearful. And so building a sense of belonging at this point isn't just a nice to have anymore, it's essential. And when we know that when families feel welcomed, valued, and engaged, students thrive academically, socially, and emotionally. And when families hesitate to pick up the phone, someone mentioned this, right? Or write an email or walk through the doors, it's often not disinterest. It's a question of whether they feel like they belong in that space. So, today we're going to explore how authentic partnerships can create the conditions where students and families alike feel seen, supported, and connected. And that's what sets the stage for engagement and learning, and why our work is more urgent than ever. When I think about a disconnect in student sense of belonging, a few causes come to mind, and you guys nailed a few of these already. First is the post-pandemic disconnection. Students, families, and educators are still navigating that social and emotional fallout of COVID-19. Many students experienced isolation, disrupted learning, and several missed milestones. I was just in a meeting last week with sixth grade teachers who are reflecting on how this year's class of sixth graders are COVID kindergartners. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's at that point already. And it's really affected the way that they had to intentionally adjust teaching strategies. So, a strong sense of belonging can help repair that rupture and rebuild trust in school. Rising mental health needs, rates of anxiety, depression, and stress among young people are at record highs. Research shows that belonging is a protective factor, and students who feel connected to peers and adults are more resilient, engaged, and better able to cope with challenges. There's increasing diversity. Schools are serving more diverse student populations across race, culture, language, and ability, and belonging ensures that differences are not just acknowledged, but valued, creating inclusive learning spaces where all students can thrive. And polarization and social pressures, students are growing up in a climate of heightened social tension right now. And on top of that, digital polarization, Schools can be one of the few places where young people experience unity and community across their differences. And side note, if you haven't read the book, The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, check it out. We'll share a link at the end of the presentation. Academic recovery and engagement. Belonging is directly linked to motivation and academic outcomes. Students who feel they matter to their school community and attend more regularly engage more deeply, and persist through those challenges. And lastly, teacher retention and morale. It's not just students. Educators also need community. A culture of belonging supports staff well-being. It reduces burnout, and it also creates stronger adult-student relationships. Now, I want you to take a moment to think back to a time when you felt a sense of belonging. It doesn't have to be in a school setting, but take a second. Got something? Okay, so now think about, where were you? Who were you with? What conditions were necessary to feel that way? So overall, what is it about that experience that stands out to you?
I don't mind sharing.
Thanks, Christy.
Of course. I was trying to think of different situations where I didn't feel a sense of belonging and then where I did, and comparing them.
Mm,
Ironically, I think when I felt the most sense of belonging was when I was with like people,
mm,
meaning whether academically they were teachers that taught the same grade level, or sport wise, we were all into the same kind of sports, or even just like the way we processed some of our thoughts. I always felt a sense of belonging. Like my principal is a good example. She approaches behaviors and trauma very similar to myself. And so when I came to here, I felt like I belonged here because we both had similar views and approaches. So I feel like when you're with people that are
mm.
similar to you in any sort of way, it kind of helps bring that belonging.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thanks for sharing.
I can go. The individuals, I think it was the attention. When I was in the space, I could tell they were attentive, by the body language, eye contact,
Mm,
the feedback, the engagement, right? It wasn't just feeling like I was talking or they were talking at me.
mhm,
And I just felt in a collaborative space, even though we weren't necessarily equal, if that makes sense. And I can actually relate that to a couple different times when I've gone to, whether it's a Chamber of Commerce meeting or a, committee meeting or something in the community that's, supposed to be like a forum or something, right? It's the
right.
times where you can feel and tell that someone's listening,
Mhm.
that make the most impact, to me, or feeling of belonging.
Perfect. Thank you, Crystal. Those are two really good examples.
I agree with both. I just want to add personally, when I feel like I belong when I come into it respecting myself,
Mm,
whether I'm different from everyone else or whether like, whether there's commonalities or differences. I
mhm,
I I have to first learn to respect myself and to value what I bring to the table, but with humility.
mm.
Not going in there like I have all the answers, but going in there humbly, but also respecting what I can bring to the table and what I can learn while at said table.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you, Evelise. And you do that. I've experienced that with you many times. When students feel like they truly belong in school, it changes everything. They're more motivated to participate in class, more willing to take academic risks, and they're more likely to stretch themselves as learners. Belonging also supports mental health and well-being. It reduces feelings of isolation and anxiety, which we know are real concerns for so many of our students right now. On the flip side, when belonging is missing, the impact is just as powerful, but on the opposite direction. Students may disengage, underperform, or even withdraw altogether, and that's why creating that sense of community is necessary for both learning and thriving. When we talk about authentic family school partnerships, we're really talking about sending a powerful message to students. The people who know you best at home and the people who teach you every day are on the same team. And that alignment matters so much because when families are invited in, not just to receive information, but to share their knowledge, culture, and strengths, students see that their identity is honored. They see that their family's voice counts and that their success is a shared priority. And that's what amplifies belonging. It's not just about welcoming families into the building, it's about creating a sense of unity where students feel supported by a whole community working together on their behalf. And those of you who just shared out, it's to that point of, you are there at the invitation, but also what you say, what you share, what you contribute matters and is heard and seen. And that's what really allows for that sense of belonging in all spaces. This alignment between home and school deepens belonging in three important ways. First, validation. Students feel that who they are and where they come from is respected and valued inside the school community. And their home lives aren't something separate from learning, they're seen as a source of strength. Second, consistency. When families and schools share the same goals and communicate clearly, students experience stability. It reduces the disconnects between what happens at home and what happens at school. And third, empowerment. When families are invited to be co-creators in the learning journey, they model what belonging looks like for their children. Students see that their families have a voice and a role in their education. And together, validation, consistency, and empowerment send a clear message that you belong here. As we start to talk about re-engagement, I want to pause and clarify something important. Re-engagement isn't about starting over or building everything from scratch. We tend to do that sometimes in education. The truth is, those connections between educators, families, and students are already there. Sometimes they've just gone quiet or they've been overshadowed by those challenges that we've named. Our job isn't to invent belonging out of thin air. It's to uncover what's already working, to reignite the sparks that are still there, and to help those sparks grow into stronger, more visible connections. And when we approach re-engagement in this way, it feels doable. It's not another initiative piled on top. It's about breathing new life into the relationships and partnerships that we already have. When we talk about re-engagement, a few strategies rise to the top. The first is listening before leading. Too often we jump straight into planning without pausing to hear from the people we're serving. Holding simple listening sessions, coffee chats, or even creating student advisory committees helps us surface what's working and where support is most needed. And remember, narrative data, those stories, comments, and lived experiences can be just as powerful. Tools like short surveys, virtual polls, or empathy interviews make it easy to gather that feedback and build trust. The second strategy is small wins, big impact. Re-engagement doesn't have to mean launching something brand new. Sometimes the most effective move is to start with a tradition families already love, like a literacy night or an art showcase, and refresh it with student-led activities, family storytelling, or even virtual participation options. A school that I taught at would work with their students to plan an open house that was entirely student-led. The kids were responsible for welcoming the families and then leading them through the entire event. And the same school held project showcases quarterly, which were also student-led, and family members could come into the school and tour the presentations of the hard work and accomplishments kids were doing in their classes. And both of those events were popular and highly attended because families really wanted to come in and see the achievement and hear about them directly from their students. Also, just as important, remember to celebrate wins. Even the smallest acts of family engagement are worth spotlighting publicly. It shows families that their contributions matter, and it also builds that momentum for deeper partnerships. So building on those first strategies, the next one is make the first move. Too often we wait for families to reach out, but re-engagement means we take the initiative. A quick phone call, a text or a Parent Square message, even a handwritten note go a long way in rebuilding trust and reminding families that they're welcome. The next is anchor in shared purpose. Families want to know that we're working toward the same vision. Simple unifying messages like together we make our schools thrive, or my school district uses together we learn, paired with consistent visuals on newsletters, social media, and bulletin boards, keep that shared purpose visible and alive. And finally, student energy as a spark. Students are often the best bridge between home and school, obviously, right? When they invite families into their learning, whether through hosting showcases, joining planning sessions, or even creating short videos about what school means to them, it lights a fire of connection that feels authentic and joyful. When we put all of these pieces together, listening, small wins, making the first move, anchoring in shared purpose, and sparking through student energy, we're not starting from scratch. We're nurturing the connections that already exist. Now that we've explored strategies to re-engage families, students, and staff, let's shift into the next step, reimagining how we build inclusive, collaborative environments. Reimagining is about encouraging fresh perspectives on family engagement. Too often, our work has been transactional. Come to a meeting or attend this event, where families participate but don't shape the experience. The big shift we want to make is moving from families support our agenda to families shape the agenda with us. When families are true partners, their voices, knowledge, and strengths influence the decisions, events, and learning experiences in our schools. One tool that has helped us guide this work is the dual capacity building framework. It reminds us that effective family engagement happens when we build both the capacity of families to support learning and also the capacity of schools to engage families meaningfully. It's not just about inviting families in, it's about creating conditions where they can contribute their knowledge, skills, and perspectives, while schools also grow the structures and practices to partner. This framework aligns perfectly with our shift to relational engagement. Moving from come to a meeting to let's co-create positions families as partners who help shape the agenda, not just support it. And when we do this, we create experiences that are inclusive, culturally responsive, and truly collaborative, where both students and families feel seen and connected to the learning journey. We are going to share this framework in the chat, and I'm going to give you a few minutes to take it in, whether it's the first time or the 100th time you've seen it. I will name that it's dense, and you will likely notice something every time you look at it. So for those of you, this is the first time looking at the framework, don't be overwhelmed. Just see what you notice. And I want you to be thinking about what your district or community is practicing. Where do you see areas in the framework where you can say, oh yeah, we're totally rocking that? And then are there areas for growth opportunity? If there are things that are coming up for you that you would be willing and brave to share out, I'll invite you to unmute.
Hi, Heather. I'm going to chime in.
Hi, Tabitha.
Hi, I am Tabitha Jackson. I'm from MSD Warren Township. And I think something that Warren is doing well, this past summer, we were intentional with training our new teachers in the district on the basics of family engagement. So that was building their confidence and building their capacity so that they were more confident dealing with families and chatting with families. So I think that's something where we've really grown. But we need to do that with our families now too, and better. So really building the confidence and capacity of our families. So some pros and some growth there.
Thank you, Tabitha. And Tabitha is one of the districts that is part of this grant work together.
Hi, Heather. It's Jamila. I'll go.
Hi, Jamila.
Hi. I am as you know, from Gary Community School Corporation. I think ours is pretty similar to what Tabitha said with Warren Township. Over the last, let's see, I've been here about 6 months at this point, maybe 7. We have actively worked to make sure all of our educators, whether teachers or paraprofessionals, security, every staff member you can think of is equipped to deal with families in a more restorative way, to really understand where families are coming from and not have these reactionary responses to them, and not see it as a them versus us. I think now we are picking up with, we've done some trainings for families, but like my focus right now is mental health support. So getting some behavioral health intervention trainings for our families. And then also getting them trained on like our new curricula that we have at some of our different school levels, to just make sure that they're in the know and are fully equipped to be their kids' first educators at home. So I see, you know, our positives, but also our area of growth right in that green area under policy and program.
Yeah. Thank you, Jamila. And Jamila in the Gary school system is also part of this grant work. So we're all pretty familiar with the dual capacity framework.
Something I am personally and professionally appreciating is how our school district has been very intentional with being culturally responsive and respectful. We, back in the day, it used to be, just 2 languages for the most part in the school, but now, Christy, correct me if I'm wrong, at our school in particular, I think there's 5 different languages.
We actually have 8.
8, thank you. So the fact that we are noticing and we are doing our part to to extend the hand. I'm not saying that we're all learning languages, right? Our brains are not at that capacity once we reach a certain age, but at least we're being intentional with trying to be supportive, trying to figure out how to best communicate with families and giving families an opportunity to speak and to shine. So that's something that caught my attention.
Yeah, thank you, Evelise. Well, you have access to this resource now. And so I would invite you to continue to take it in and just acclimate yourself to the structure of it, right? You've got the educator's role, you have the family's role are separate, and we all have separate challenges. But then how do we come together and make sure that the schools has their responsibility and their part in it, but also that the families have, their part in it? And how do we recognize that together? So how do we bridge that gap together so that we can think about, what is it that we need in our schools and our homes that are going to provide that growth opportunity for our students, who are ultimately who we are in service of. And then how do we really push that into the harder stuff, like the policies and the programs, and really how do we give each other voice in that? And then ultimately, how does that produce those outcomes that we're looking for? So keep that resource. That is, it's a good one. And the link that you have has a whole bunch of information on it. Dr. Karen Mapp is the originator of the thinking, along with a team of people. And there are a couple of videos there that you can watch her talk about that. And it's good stuff. So take that back to your places of employment, whether it's a district or a community organization, and think about how that might influence the way that you're engaging families in your work. Now that we've talked about shifting from transactional to relational engagement, let's think about what that can actually look like in practice. So first we have reframing invitations. Instead of saying, come to our parent meeting, we might say, we'd love your perspective as we shape our goals for the year. And that simple change signals that families' voices really matter. And I've seen this in action at a middle school where the principal invited families to co-plan the year's wellness initiative. And one parent shared, "I never thought my ideas would actually guide school programs." And the staff were amazed at the practical, creative solutions that families were contributing. Next, we have co-create spaces. Don't just host events for families, design them with families. One school invited parents, caregivers, and students to plan a cultural celebration. Families suggested activities that reflected their community's strengths, from storytelling to traditional recipes. And the night was a huge success because it felt authentic and meaningful to everyone involved. Story sharing is another powerful tool. Move beyond just surveys by creating spaces where families can share their stories, values, and aspirations for their children. For example, a school hosted a family panel where parents talked about their experiences navigating remote learning, going back to that COVID-19, right? Those insights directly shape new communication strategies that actually worked for families, and then they've also lasted all of this time. Take a strength-based approach. So instead of asking families to just volunteer for concessions, which we need them to do, by the way, or support tasks, ask, what skills, talents, or passions would you like to share with our school community? Recently, I was at a middle school during their Passion Day, and there was a group of students who were interested in the game of cricket. They wanted to spend their passion time playing cricket. And some already knew how to play, but there were some who needed to learn. In planning ahead of time, the teacher anticipated that she did not know enough about the sport to teach the kids who needed help. So she reached out to a group of dads who then came in and taught the basics and played with the 7th and 8th graders. And they all had so much fun, and the dads love the opportunity and are anxious to come back in and play cricket with the kids again. Another example is a parent who was a professional artist, ended up leading a student mural project, and the students were inspired by seeing their community reflected on the school walls. And this also makes me think of the opportunity during career fairs where family members and caregivers can share out their profession and expertise with students. Shared leadership is key. Invite families to advisory councils, hiring committees, or curriculum review teams. Give them genuine decision-making power, not just updates after the decisions are made. One district I've worked with set up a family equity council, and families influenced a new grading policy that made learning more equitable and transparent for all students. And I just thought this was such a brave and powerful opportunity. And finally, don't underestimate everyday touch points. Simple, consistent interactions like a teacher sending a positive text about a student's progress, or a principal calling to ask for feedback, that those things all build trust and show families that they're valued every day, not just during big events or when the school needs something from them. When we combine these strategies, we move from families being passive attendees to active partners, and that's when belonging truly grows for students, families, and for staff. And this is really the heart of what we're talking about. When families, cultures, voices, and lived experiences are truly shaping the work of the school, something powerful happens. Schools stop being just institutions that students attend. Instead, they become communities where students feel like they belong. And students see themselves reflected in the curriculum, in events, and in the adults around them. Families feel their contributions matter, and together that alignment between homeschool and community will create an environment where students don't just go to school, but they also feel at home there. Building on what we've talked about, reframing invitations, co-creating spaces, sharing stories, and embedding everyday touch points, we can take these ideas even further by integrating family voice into the very structures and experiences of the school. One way to do this is through curriculum connections. When schools invite families to share cultural stories, traditions, or literature from their heritage, teachers can weave those into reading selections or classroom projects. The impact is profound. Students see themselves reflected in what they're learning, and classmates develop an appreciation for diverse perspectives. And this not only fosters respect, but also deepens students' sense of belonging. Another example is redesigning family events. Instead of a one-size-fits-all open house, schools can co-create family learning nights where families help choose the focus, like bilingual literacy, financial literacy, or maybe navigating college applications. And when families see that events are designed around their needs and their expertise, participation increases and that trust is strengthened. Parent advisory councils with power are a critical lever. When districts create councils like the Family Equity Council that I mentioned earlier, parents, especially from historically underrepresented groups, can advise on policies, discipline practices, or resource allocation. And the impact here is clear. Decisions better reflect community realities, and the families see that their input is truly shaping the school's direction. Next is multicultural communication. Evelise talked about this earlier. When schools ensure that newsletters, announcements, and conferences are consistently available in families' home languages, it removes barriers to participation. Families who were once excluded from critical information can now fully engage in school life, which builds equity, trust, and inclusion. Celebrating funds of knowledge. This might look like a school hosting a community skills showcase, inviting parents and caregivers to share their talents, from cooking to carpentry to storytelling, with the students. And this approach not only honors families' expertise, but also helps students take pride in their own backgrounds and community. And one last powerful approach is responsive discipline and restorative practices. Instead of relying solely on punitive measures, school engaged families in developing restorative practices and that reflect the community values. Jamila talked about this earlier. The result is a system where discipline becomes about learning and healing rather than exclusion, and it strengthens that trust between families and the school. And all of these practices share a common thread. They center around families as partners, leveraging their strengths, and create a school environment where students don't just attend, they truly belong. Now that we've explored re-engaging and reimagining family partnerships, let's talk about the final step, reigniting, sustaining momentum for the future. For too long, family engagement in schools has been synonymous with events. Open houses, parent nights, conferences. Those moments matter, of course, but by themselves, they can feel one-time, transactional, or even intimidating for some families. What families and students really need is something deeper, ongoing relationships. That means embedding routines and systems that keep families connected year-round. It's regular two-way communication between teachers and parents, standing advisory councils where family voices truly shape decisions, and small, consistent interactions like being greeted warmly at drop-off or receiving a quick, positive note about their child. And when we make the shift from events to relationships, the messages to families change as well. Instead of saying, we want you here for this one evening, we're saying, you belong here every day. You're part of the community year-round. And that is exactly what transforms schools from institutions students attend into communities where students and families belong. As we think about sustaining family engagement over time, several key practices help shift from one-off events to ongoing meaningful relationships. The first is consistent communication routines are essential. Instead of only reaching out during conferences or report cards, teachers can schedule monthly check-ins with families, And maybe it's a text or parent square, phone call or email, but focusing on student strengths and progress. Schools can also establish two-way communication systems so families can share feedback easily rather than only receiving updates. Welcoming everyday interactions matter just as much. Staff being visible at drop-off, pickup, and events, greeting families by name, asking about their children, and making those moments intentional helps build trust. Principals or counselors hosting informal coffee chats throughout the year give families a chance to ask questions and connect without waiting for a big event. Embedded family voice ensures that families are not just heard once a year, but are part of ongoing decision making. Families can serve on standing advisory groups like school improvement teams with a regular meeting cadence. Feedback loops rather than one-time surveys show families how their input is used and invite continued conversation. Culturally responsive systems are crucial. Communication should routinely be multilingual, and interpretation should be a standing practice, not just an add-on for special events. Family contributions, stories, expertise, traditions can be integrated in classroom projects and curriculum throughout the year. Strength-based partnerships create sustained involvement. Families can share skills and resources through career talks, mentoring, or classroom support. Maintaining a living family resource map helps schools know the assets present in the community year-round. And finally, continuous celebrations and recognition keep the energy alive. Rather than relying on one large end-of-the-year event, schools can spotlight student growth and family contributions regularly through newsletters, assemblies, or social media. And these small, consistent acts show families that they're valued and build belonging over time. As we move toward closing this section, I want to emphasize the importance of keeping the vision alive, embedding belonging as a core value of your school culture. Let me share a story. A teacher recently told me about a student who transferred mid-year. On his first day, the teacher asked him to share something he wanted classmates to know about him. And the boy hesitated and said, "I move around a lot, so I don't usually bother making friends." And without missing a beat, another student raised her hand and said, "Well, you belong here now. We'll make sure that you don't feel like you have to start over." And that moment wasn't orchestrated. It wasn't part of a special event or a program. It was the product of a culture where belonging had been intentionally nurtured day after day. And this is what happens when belonging isn't treated as just a theme for a kickoff assembly or a poster on the wall, but as a core value embedded in the routines, language, and also the expectations of the school. Students will carry it with them and they will pass it on, offering belonging to one another. As we bring today's session to a close, I want to leave you with a couple concrete actions you can take immediately. First, identify one engagement practice, whether it's a family meeting, a classroom routine, or a communication strategy that you can refresh or strengthen in the next 30 days. Make it intentional and think about how it builds belonging for students and families. Second, look for one opportunity to involve families in shaping the work of your school or organization. It could be through a survey, a focus group, or inviting them to co-create an event or some sort of curriculum connection. Even small steps towards authentic partnership can have a big impact. And here's the message I want you to carry forward. This work matters deeply and the need is urgent. Our students and the families who support them are watching, and they notice when we make space for them, when we value their voice, and when we build genuine connections. But there's always hope. Every small action you take, every relationship that you nurture, every story you honor adds up. Schools can be more than institutions students attend. They can become communities where every child knows that they belong. And when belonging is intentional, consistent, and centered in family partnerships, students will thrive, families will engage, and educators will see the difference in the everyday life of their school. So as you leave today, think, what one step will I take to strengthen belonging this week? Because that step has the power to transform lives. Thank you for spending time with us today. Please reach out if you have questions, want to be thought partners, and or share what you are doing.
Heather, I just appreciate so much your lovely, graceful approach to facilitating. I could listen to you forever. Delightful. So for those of us intent on comprehensive positive outcomes for students, Heather has helped us see the impact of family engagement on belonging as a core value. We will want to re-engage connections that already exist with a deeper engagement, reimagine partnerships that honor family strengths to co-create the agenda with the schools, reignite to transform school culture through ongoing practices. Thank you, Heather, and all of you who participated in this impactful event. Please continue to follow the work of the Statewide Family Engagement Center.
Thank you everyone for being here today and giving up an hour of your life to learn together.
Thank you so much for your participation in this presentation. Please leave feedback. We appreciate that and use it for grant reporting.
Have a great day.
Thanks, Jill. Bye.